Hello and welcome to episode 48 of the Footy with Fletch podcast. In this episode, I'm joined by Jaz Ferguson. Jaz was drafted to North Melbourne with pick 51 in the 2021 AFLW Draft. She was drafted from Collingwood's VFLW program. Jaz has played 36 AFLW games. Hello, Jaz. Thanks for joining me on the podcast. How are you?
Good, thank you. Thanks for having me. Very excited to be here.
And obviously, pre-season officially started last week. How has it sort of been so far?
Yeah, good. First week, always a tough one. We do lots of testing to see how everyone or how the whole group is going, how the off-season went, trying to make sure we come in nice and fit and healthy. So strength testing, running testing, all those kind of things. So it's a pretty tough week to get through, but it is nice to get everyone back together officially. A lot of girls went away in the off-season, so we haven't actually really been together completely as a whole list for quite a few months. So it's nice to see everyone's faces and all the staff as well. You don't really get to see them too much in the off-season. So it's been nice to get back into the club, have the boys around at the moment as well. So it's nice to see them, and they got a win on the weekend. So it's all going really well.
And what is the mood like around the club, given that the boys did get a win on the weekend, the first win for the season?
Yeah, everyone was super excited. A lot of the girls were really excited for them. I think a lot of the girls on social media reposting that the boys won. It had been maybe a little bit flat around the club, just being in there a few little bits. Obviously, the boys haven't had the season they would have liked to have. A few losses and some tough losses in there. So the mood was a little bit low, and still just understanding that they're continuing to grow and develop as a list as a whole. But it's been nice. I think sometimes once we come back in, it kind of rejuvenates the club a little bit. So last week and this week, the vibe's been really high, and it's really nice to see the whole club back together.
And how did your personal footy journey sort of start? How did you first fall in love with the game?
Yeah, so I didn't really play much when I was younger, played a lot of netball and basketball growing up. Always enjoyed watching my father play, my brothers play, but never really picked it up myself. Started to fall in love with it once the AFLW competition kind of started. I was playing a little bit through school, but more for just a bit of fun with some friends. And then my PE teacher at the time said, like, I actually reckon if you give this a crack, you might actually go pretty far with it. So started kicking with him at lunchtime to get my skills up, and then tried out for Gippsland Power as like a 19-year-old, so an over age up, but was allowed to play because I hadn't played footy before, and absolutely just loved the game, loved the contest. I was probably known as someone who's a bit rough in netball and basketball, so it was actually kind of nice to be playing a sport where you're allowed to show that competitiveness and tackle and compete for the ball. And then, as I said, once the AFLW competition started, I just fell in love with it.
And what was it like, I guess, playing basketball and netball?
So I really loved it. They were both one of my favourite sports, and I couldn't really pick between them when I was growing up. I played a lot of both. Got to some pretty high levels with them both, but never could quite reach that top level. But absolutely loved it. I really love playing team sport. I've never really been an individual sport kind of person. I love the team aspects of it. I love the culture that comes from it, the team, the friendships, all those cliches, but you do really find your best friends in those sports. And I am very determined and really love just competing. Like, I think it's something that you miss in the off season, is just competing and getting out there and trying to get the best out of yourself. So I've always been heavily involved in sport and love that competitive side.
And which AFL team did you grow up supporting as a child? And did you have any favourite players growing up?
Oh, I do support Essendon technically, but that's more because of my dad. He kind of forced it on us as kids. Did love James Hird growing up, but in general, I just actually really enjoyed watching the competition as a whole. Like, I really enjoyed any game that was on the TV, I'd be sitting there watching it with Dad. We never really used to go to many games, so I wouldn't say I'm a really avid supporter. And then once I met my partner, he went for Collingwood, so I do have a soft spot for them and enjoy watching them as well. So there's a few favourite players. Scott Prenderbury, someone you can't really go past in the AFL space because he's just a legend and goes about it the right way.
Kendall's, what a star he is. And obviously, you did play with Collingwood in the VFLW. What was that experience like for you?
Oh, it was amazing. It was my first, I guess, semi-professional exposure, and I just absolutely loved it. I loved how invested the coaches were for you. I love the facilities. I think you can't go past Collingwood's facility. I think it would be one of the best or one of the best. And being a part of that club, obviously, they've got a massive supporter base, an extensive club history. I think when you're there, you can feel that. They did support the women's program really well, and it was just nice to be a part of a successful team. When I was there, we were, undefeated in quite a few seasons, won a premiership there as well. And I just love being in that professional environment where everyone's really dedicated. You're doing your gym, you're doing all your extras, your recovery, you have access to those facilities, access to great support staff, coaches. And I did really enjoy the competitiveness of the VFLW.
And what do you think was the biggest thing you took away from your time at Collingwood and in the VFLW?
I think I took away from it just that next level of footy. Like I kind of learnt, I guess, some of those elite behaviours or what it takes to be at that semi-professional level. I think coming from the NAB League, I was a 19-year-old playing obviously against younger players. So once I stood up or stepped up until that VFLW level, I kind of learnt how strong you need to be, how much more competitive you need to be against more I guess, female bodies rather than, I guess, playing against younger girls. So I really took away from it the strength side of it and how important your gym is. And then also what it takes off the field to be a really strong player. So your recovery, like your gym, as I said, like all those kind of things, that elite professional side of it, I really took from the Collingwood VFLW team.
And in 2021, you were named in the VFLW Team of the Year side. What was that like for you?
Yeah, it was really nice. I think prior to that, I was more of a background player. I kind of just enjoyed getting selected every week and just playing, but I wasn't really making a name for myself. So during some of those COVID years, I really put my head down and decided that I wanted to give it a real crack. I wanted to try and make it to that next level and put my name forward. So I went off in the off season, did a lot of hard work, a lot of extra skills, a lot of extra running, and came into that season with really high expectations that I wanted to be considered to be drafted. So I'd put in a lot of work. So to be announced in that team was just really nice experience for me. And I guess I was proud of myself that the work that I had put in had been noticed as such. And I think it put me in a really good space for my name to be out there to be drafted, especially being named in that team. Obviously, everyone looks at that team and they go off that as well. So it was nice for my hard work to pay off, and then obviously led into getting drafted as well.
Were there any particular points in your career where you realised I'm a chance at going to the next level here to get drafted?
It was probably only that season. As I said, I think I was content with, not that I wasn't putting in effort, that's not me, but I just was kind of content with being that background player. I wasn't putting in the extra hard yards. But once I got to that year, I realised that my skills are really good. I started the season really well, and it was probably about halfway through that season, especially when I started getting interest from North, that I actually realised, okay, like I really need to keep up my games here, keep working hard, and it was really only that season I realised that I was starting to get noticed, and that I had kind of put my hand up for clubs to notice me, and I was very fortunate enough for North too.
Were there any other clubs other than North Melbourne that sort of had an interest in drafting you? And if so, who were they?
No, actually. So this is what I had a very stressful draft night. I had only been spoken to really by North. I had a little chat with Collingwood, but that was more just generally about where I was at in the VFLW program. It wasn't really around being drafted to their AFL team. So I only had interest from North. So I was very nervous. I've heard from some friends and some girls that I've made friends with my own team, that they had 5 or 6 or heaps of clubs kind of looking at them, and they were kind of, I guess, a little bit more confident they were going to get picked up. Whereas I'd only had a meeting with North, I'd only done some tests for them, and I was very nervous sitting at home that I was kind of every time North had a pick, I knew when it was coming up. I knew it was like the next couple. And then when they had their pick and it wasn't me to start with, I was getting very, very nervous. I think I was the second last pick of North that night. So, yeah, it was a very stressful night.
And it wasn't just the stress of the draft itself. I heard your computer crashed during draft night. How stressful was that as well?
Yeah, I think I would probably say to say I had a little mini breakdown. I think mum was trying to hold it together for me. When the computer went down, being in lockdown, it was all, yeah, via internet, via FaceTime. I can't remember what it was back then, live stream. So I was sitting in the lounge room with just my family. Obviously, we weren't meant to have many people over. So sitting there, very stressed, the computer cut out and it was just adding on to it. And as I said, was stressed for about 5 minutes there that I was about to just give up and go up to my room and say, no, I'm not getting drafted. I'm over these computers down. I'm just going to go and sit in my room. But got it back on. As I said, mum and dad were very good. They were trying to keep, obviously, a very steady head and not trying to get too emotional as well. And then got the computer back on and I was drafted, yeah, just later.
Well, it was probably lucky that it didn't happen right before you were drafted, I guess, and you didn't miss your name getting selected.
I know that would have been very fun. I'm not really sure what I would have done then. I imagine I would have been at the time after I got drafted. You obviously get lots of phone calls, lots of messages, so it would have been very funny sitting there, not trying to get the laptop plugged in and then getting all those messages. It would have been very confusing. But I think we got it on with about 5 minutes before that time came, so we were very lucky.
And you were selected by North Melbourne with pick 51 in the 2021 AFLW Draft. What was it like to be selected by the Kangaroos?
Oh, it was, yeah, thinking back to that night, I get goosebumps thinking about it. It was, I guess, all reward for all the hard work that I'd been putting in, not only, I guess, in my football journey, but just hard work from my netball and basketball background as well. As I mentioned, I've very determined and I was really determined to try and succeed and get to that top level. So the amount of hours that I put in growing up, driving to training, living out in Gippsland, you don't have as many opportunities down that way, or the standard's not quite as high. So you have to drive into the city a lot. So my parents would have driven me. Oh, I wouldn't even want to know the amount of hours they've driven me to the city and back for trainings and games. So to get drafted, it was very overwhelming at the time, but it was just all these kind of emotions of the hours, the commitment from myself and my parents, from my family, the things that I had missed. I grew up missing a lot of school stuff, a lot of family friends' birthdays, events, all those kind of things because of my sport. So getting drafted was just kind of that reward that I had missed those things for a reason as such, and that everything was paying off. And it was, very emotional, but very exciting all at the same time.
How long did it sort of, I guess, as well take to sink in that you were actually going to be playing in the AFLW?
Yeah, I think I went to placement the next day. I was still studying uni at that time, and I went to placement the next day. And I probably still at that point hadn't really let it all kind of sink in until I started getting phone calls from like Reese and all the staff at the club kind of organising my number. Then when I actually went into the club for the first time, I think it probably took a month or two to really sink in. Once I was actually in the club, being around the girls, meeting everybody, starting to do training, I feel like that's when it actually sunk in, when you realised like, holy shit, almost, that like you're actually here now and you get to really enjoy the experience. So it definitely didn't sink in that night or probably the next day. Wasn't until I started, seeing my name on the locker or meeting Jazz Garner, Emma Carney, those superstars and everything like that, that it actually sunk in that I had reached that level. And to be at North was amazing as well.
You sort of touched on it, but what was it like walking into the club for the first time and to be out at Arden Street Oval?
Yeah, I think obviously very nerve wracking as it would be. I think the time I rocked up to Collingwood initially as well was very nerve wracking. So I think having that experience, I was a little bit more calm, but you were still you'd seen some of those players that I now call my friends on TV. You'd seen Emma Carney captain the side, you'd seen her win premierships, you'd seen her make all Australians, and then here I am standing in front of her introducing myself, and it was almost a surreal experience, but really cool. Like it's so amazing to meet these kind of players and realize they're obviously normal. They are just like everybody else, and they're extremely friendly, and really easy to get along with. All the staff as well were easy to get along with, and to go down to Arden Street and to walk through those doors, and again the facilities are amazing in there, and it was just really nice and a great experience.
You were drafted by the club in 2021 and you made your debut in round one of season six. What was that moment like for you?
Yeah, I think I worked really, really hard in that preseason leading up to it. Obviously, coming in as a draftee, especially being overage, I wanted to put in a lot of work and obviously show that I'd been drafted for a reason and show my teammates that I'm here to work, I'm here to work hard, and I want to be a part of a successful team. So I had worked really hard in that preseason leading up to try and learn the structures, learn how my teammates play, learn how to fit into the North system. And then to be announced that I got to debut in round one was so nice. I remember my parents straight away when I found out, and obviously they were very emotional for me, but really excited as well. I had initially set a goal that I would love to have just played one game in my debut season and then to, get picked for round one and then play all the games that I was eligible for that season was, again, a nice reward for some hard work that I'd put in that preseason. And just amazing to get out there and experience that AFLW level because it is that little bit quicker, a little bit, you got to be a little bit stronger, a little bit more competitive. Like it's great to be at that level because you do really get challenged every game.
And you played 10 AFLW games in your first season, averaging 7 disposals and 2.6 marks. What do you think was some of the key takeaways from your first season in the AFLW?
Yeah, as I said, it was an adjustment as such. Like it is slightly, as I said, quicker, faster. There's bigger bodies. Like you do really have to adjust to that pretty quickly, or you're going to get obviously left behind. But I think the biggest adjustment for me in that first season was some of the forwards that I played on. Obviously in VFLW, you play on some great forwards as well, but going to the AFLW, you're playing on some really big names. So I played on Taylor Harris in my first season, and that was a whole experience. I think it was obviously quite difficult. I think she got the better of me definitely in my first game, but to be up against such a big name, such a powerful forward, such an agile forward, was something I really had to adjust to and learn how to play on some really high ranking forwards and some fantastic forwards for many teams. So definitely some learning points from that first season was just adjusting to, how much they can jump, how strong they all are, and try not to get pushed around too much or make too many highlight reels because I do tend to get in some forward highlight reels here and there.
And how stressful is it to I guess, line up on players like Taylor Harris, who's an absolute star of the comp?
Yeah, it is really stressful. I've gotten better at it now, but I think something that I tried to do in my first season is not to overthink it too much. Like I think obviously I could have easily got overawed and overwhelmed the fact that I was playing on Taylor Harris, but I think you actually need to almost just take the external part to it out of it. Just think about her as another forward. She's obviously a great mark, can lead up at the ball. So I just need to try and nullify those aspects. So it was as much as possible trying not to overthink it and worry about obviously how many fantastic marks she's taken in the past. It's just about going out there, playing my role, and trying to nullify obviously what she's very, very good at. Afterwards, then you go back and you're like, oh my God, how did I just do that? But you try not too much in the lead up, especially in that week, to try and overplay it too much in your head because it becomes obviously very stressful and very overwhelming very quickly.
And 2022 was a bit of a weird year for the AFLW, it can be said, because there was season six, which ended in April, and then season seven started in August. What was, I guess, the transition between the two seasons like, especially in your first year in the AFLW?
I actually really liked it. Looking back at it now, at the time I was a bit exhausted because I'd then been playing kind of footy very consistently for like almost 2 years and it wasn't really without a break. But looking back on it now, I actually think it was the best thing for my development. I think having that short off season where you didn't go away from the club too much really helped keep my fitness up, keep my skills up, keep the touch of the footy up because I don't reckon we really had much downtime at all. We kind of would have had maybe a couple of weeks before we went back into pre-season. So it was actually a really good thing for me early on in my career because I think it allowed me to learn from my first season, adjust on those first a few concepts that I maybe hadn't grasped yet, and then implement them straight away. Whereas I guess now, when our season finishes, we have almost 5-6 months away from the club, which is actually quite a long time, and it is quite hard to kind of keep that motivation up to stay fit, to stay keeping touch on the ball, keeping your skills up, reviewing your game. Like almost a little bit too long. Whereas that quick turnaround was actually quite good for me, especially in my early stages, to just keep rolling as such.
And in season 7, you played 13 AFLW games, averaging over 6 disposals and 1 mark a game. How did you find your second season in the AFLW?
I found in terms of, I guess, stat wise, it probably doesn't improve. But again, being the fullback, my stats aren't always going to be the highest. But I think the big difference I found was level of confidence. So that's something I felt with every season that I've got more and more confident in my skill set and my role in the team. I think in my first season, I feel like I can barely remember some of those games. It was just, yeah, an overwhelming experience as such. So you don't often think about the fact that you were playing and that you're doing really well, and you don't really get to reward yourself during that first season. You're pretty much just trying not to get overawed by everything. Whereas going into the second season, I felt like I settled a little bit more. I was more confident in my position in the team. I felt like I was more confident I was going to keep getting picked every week. Whereas again, my first season, I was every team selection, not sure if I'd done my job, not sure if I was going to get picked again. Whereas in my second season, I was more confident. I had more understanding of the game plan, my role in the game plan, and that I think allowed me to, I think, have a better season. Maybe not in terms of stats, but a better season with more confidence under my belt.
And in 2023, it was probably your breakout season. You were one of 4 Kangaroos that made the All-Australian squad alongside Emma Carney, Jasmine Garner and Ash Riddell. What did you sort of make of last season?
Again, probably the biggest thing I felt was my confidence improved. And I think that was what was shown in my All Australian section, which is fantastic. But in general, we had a fantastic season last year as a whole, as a team. Making the grand final was fantastic. And we got some really good wins under our belt, which I think will actually play into this season a lot with a lot of confidence. We're known as that kind of fourth place team, I guess, in the media, whereas we're not quite as good as the big three ahead of us. Whereas we really showed in our final series last year that we should be considered one of the top three, top two, top one, whatever you want to call it. So I think some of those wins in that finals for us last year is actually going to really propel us into this season, and hopefully just keep knocking off some of those teams and show the competition that we deserve to make the grand final again and hopefully go one better.
And you talk about the big three. You had a really great start to the finals, beating Melbourne by 41 points. What did the team take away from that game going into the prelim?
I think we just took away that we can do it. I think creating almost a winning mentality is something that's really hard to do and probably underestimated in sport. But I think it just gave the group enormous confidence, using that word again, that we can actually beat that team, because we had, I think, a really, really bad record against Melbourne, Brisbane and Adelaide, that we hadn't really beaten them at all in our seasons. So going off that win and doing it in such fantastic fashion, I guess, beating them by quite a large margin and kind of keeping them out of the game completely, just gave us the absolute world of confidence that our system and every single player within our system knew what they needed to do to get that win. And it just propelled us into that prelim final week with, yeah, complete confidence that we deserve to be in the grand final. And I think the games that we'd lost against some of those teams earlier in the season actually helped us for that Adelaide game, because we only won by a point. So we were really well prepared for that game and making sure that we didn't let it slip right at the end.
How stressed were you in the last couple of minutes of that prelim final? It was obviously a 1 point win. It must have been pretty stressful, I imagine.
Yes, I think after I got up after Anne Hatchard took a specky on me, and that's when she kicked that goal to get in with a point, I was a bit like, oh, my back's a bit sore. But apart from that, yeah, I think it was almost 3 minutes that we had on the time on the clock left. It was, again, yes, internally very stressful. You're obviously trying not to externally show that you're stressed, but yes, internally, I think every single one of us it was going through our head that we were going to lose it again. It was going to come down to the last little bit. But as I said, we'd actually lost to Adelaide earlier in that season, I think by a couple points, and it was a goal kicked really late in the last minute that cost us that game. So we had reviewed that game, I think almost every single training after that, of how we can improve that situation systematically, how we can stop them from scoring. So for us going through that, it was almost like reliving a nightmare over and over again. But it was actually really good that we did that, because put us in the right mindset and the right understanding of how we were going to stop them doing that again. And it was just so, the feeling of being able to do that and successfully winning that prelim by a point and not letting Adelaide score again was such a good feeling. I think all the girls would say that's one of the best wins that they've had, because it was just so much hard work during that season and during a pretty short period that had paid off.
And what was the grand final week like, and the lead up to the game? How did you find it?
Yeah, we actually had a mindset to really embrace the week. There was obviously a lot more media around it. We had some cameras at training. We had lots of interviews to kind of do, but we just really wanted to embrace it. We hadn't obviously been in the grand final before for North Melbourne, where we knew obviously Brisbane had been in quite a few. So all we wanted to do was really just embrace the fact that we'd made it to that point in the season, in celebrate the season that we'd had, but look forward to the game and to treat it. The saying is never treat a game like treat a finals game as you do every other game, but you do almost want to treat a grand final as that little bit more above, because it is a game that is obviously under a high amount of pressure, a big crowd, lots of excitement around it. So we really wanted to try and actually embrace that fact and live up to it, enjoy the pressure that surrounds it, and just be thankful that we're there. Go out and play. Obviously, there's girls in the squad that don't get picked for that grand final, and that's devastating for them. So to be out there and to be playing, Croc just really wanted us to embrace it, enjoy it, love the feeling of being out there, and obviously didn't get the win, but still an amazing experience for all of us.
What will the side, I guess, sort of take away from that grand final defeat heading into the upcoming season in 2024?
Yeah, so we haven't reviewed the game as such yet, but I know it's coming up. We're going to start looking through some clips, obviously just to break it down and apply what we're trying to maybe tweak this year. But again, I think we're taking it out that we were obviously extremely close. I think we obviously were winning for 3/4 in the grand final. It was just that last quarter we got overrun. So I think it's taking, again, confidence from that game that we were so close to winning it, and that our game plan, our systems, again, our role players, everyone who's a part of the club, our staff, everyone who understands our program, it is on the right track, and we are right knocking on the door of taking that premiership cup. So I think it's just about going again, trying to put in that extra little bit of effort, trying to find that extra 1% that's going to get this to that premiership, and that extra bit of energy that just is going to take us above Brisbane, Melbourne, Adelaide, all those teams again.
How do you, I guess, as well as a side and individually deal with the external expectations to sort of back it up again and to make another grand final this year?
Yeah, I think a lot of the time we don't try and focus too much externally. Like a lot of the time you're trying to focus internally, on your own systems, what's going on within your own four walls. But you do obviously listen to media, and obviously we're going to be rated as one of the contenders again this year. And again, we're a team that embraces pressure, embraces expectations and embraces pressure, because I feel like it does make you better. There's no point shying away from the fact that we're going to be, as again, rated as one of the top teams. We've got a hardish fixture. We're versing all the 8 teams that were in finals again last year. And it's just about, again, embracing it. Let the challenge come at you. Well, I think we're still hunting. We're not the hunted as of yet. So it's nice to just keep trying to tick off, knock off some of those teams and go week by week and trying to, get deep into finals again.
And obviously there is a compressed part in the fixture where you will play Carlton on the 25th of September and then the Tigers 4 days later on the 29th of September. How are the playing group and how do you sort of, I guess, feel about this compressed element of the fixture?
Yeah, as a group, we're super excited. We've been obviously asking as an entire AFLW group for more games. So to have that extra game in there is great. It's obviously a step forward, and we want to keep advocating for more games. Individually, personally, I work a second job, so it's a little bit complex for me in terms of having a midweek game. It does disrupt my clientele and the work I have outside of footy, but footy is my priority. It's always been my priority, and I will obviously work around that. I would love if they could find maybe a different way around it. I guess also there's the injury side of it, high performance side of it, that if there is a higher risk. So I would have preferred to have an extra week, and then it's just 11 games over 11 weeks. But this is how the AFL is going to do it. We obviously just have to embrace it. And as I said, as a playing group, we're excited that we're getting to play 11 games, and hopefully we can keep getting our crowd numbers up and participation numbers up and people watching, so we can go for 12, 13, 14, and then hopefully a normal home and away season soon.
And you mentioned your job outside of footy. You're a physiotherapist. What
Mhm.
is that like, and how beneficial do you think that is with your footy career as well?
Yeah, it keeps me busy, but I have always been a really busy person. I really enjoy it. And I am someone who I think if I didn't have a job outside of footy would probably go insane and think about footy too much. So I quite like it as my kind of outlet. It's a nice way to take your mind off footy, especially when you have a bad game or you're I don't know, bad results or not doing well in the gym, whatever it is, like it's nice to have that outlet and go and chat to your clients and get out of there. And then I do actually really like it in terms of I obviously now understand the importance of like recovery and all that side of it is something that I advocate for my clients. And obviously doing your programs, doing your strengthening, just as important as doing your sport. So I really advocate that for my clients. But it's nice to know individually if I'm a little bit sore here or there, what I can do, because obviously I have an understanding of how to treat that injury. So I feel like I kind of get on the front foot a lot of the time because I can kind of imply my knowledge to individually how I'm going, and then I can feed it back to obviously the physios at the club. And I am always hopefully one step ahead of where I need to be because I know I needed to do the right recovery or treatment for it at the time. But I actually almost just really enjoy being in the physio part of the club just to see what everyone else is dealing with and see how they manage it. And I do often like to ask the physios at the club some questions so I can implement it into my work as well.
And what do you think are some of the biggest attributes of your game?
Oh, probably said it almost already, but I do really love, I guess, my determination. It's something that I pride myself on, is how determined I am. I also like to think that I am pretty relentless, like I don't like getting beaten. So I'm going to try my absolute hardest to make sure I either win the one-on-one contest, halve the one-on-one contest. But yeah, determination would be, I think, one of my biggest, and something I'm definitely working on is trying to help lead a little bit as well. I'd love to look at becoming a leader in the next couple of years or just strengthen my leadership qualities. In the back line, I am someone who tries to help set up other players. So I think my role, just as much as individually, is trying to set up the back line, my teammates in the back line, and then trying to set up the team as a whole in defence.
Just finally as well, in May you underwent surgery to repair a fractured right hand. How disappointing and how annoying do you think that injury has sort of been to deal with at the start of pre-season? And when can you expect to be back in full training?
Yeah, I think I was disappointed in myself. It was obviously a decision that I'd made to go and have some casual competition and some netball outside of footy in my off season, and decision that I'm obviously owning and that I've owned up to the club. And obviously we've been through that already at the moment. But my surgery was very successful. I was in fantastic hands, and the club were extremely helpful in dealing with that situation. I'm very, very fortunate. It is a very quick turnaround in terms of this injury. So I've actually already been back on the track. I'm doing full contact, full training. Still getting a little bit more comfortable with tackling. So just something that I'm just not fully confident with at the moment, just getting my hand a bit caught. So I'm doing some extras at training just to get used to that. And again, a few things like spoiling at the moment that I'm just starting to train with some lighter balls before I go back to the normal footballs. But I am full training. The other good side of it, high performance reminded me of this, is when you do an upper limb injury, you don't get to stop running. So I had about a week off from surgery to recover, and then I was back running, and I've been doing lots of off-leg sessions, can still get in the gym at the moment, and yes, back on the track and really enjoying being out there.
Well, thank you so much, Jazz, for jumping on for a chat, and all the best of luck in the upcoming season.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.